Now moving on to talk about Parmigianino, another great example of Mannerist artwork. This is his Madonna of the Long Neck. First off, you may notice that Parmigianino does not choose to use acidic colors or strange colors, so that is a way that he's a little different than some other Mannerist artists you might have seen or might see. But you'll notice that the composition is truly bizarre, right? And especially the bodies are very odd. So he definitely fits into the Mannerist schema. Now, this is a Madonna and Child painting, which is a very traditional type that really started in the Byzantine and continued on through there. But I'd argue this is one of the weirdest Madonna and Childs I've ever seen. First off, the Madonna, like, how is she seated? Where is the chair? If you look at her feet, they're kind of like half on these cushions, almost rolling, like, you don't feel like there's a sense of stability about how she's anchored. Is she floating? Like, you just can't tell. And her body just seems out of proportion. Some of it's the effect of the drapery, but it's just very, very odd. And then you look at her neck, of course, the painting is named after her, but then her hand, this long kind of spider-like hand. And you'll notice she's holding her hand in what I, again, would call a mannered gesture. To pose your hand like that, you have to kind of try to put your hand and separate the fingers in such a way in this sort of mannered gesture. So again, I think it's a great example of, like, what do I mean with a mannered gesture? That hand, for sure, and how it's being held up to her body in this very self-conscious, type of way. Like, she knows what she's doing. Then you move to the Christ child and you're like, oh my, ooh, okay, what's happening here? First off, it's like the Christ toddler, right? Like, it's like a 3-year-old. Not the newborn babe you're used to seeing in Madonna and Child images. And I love that she has the hand in the self-conscious gesture while the child seems to be sliding for the floor. Like, he seems to almost be grabbing up to her garments like, hey, mom, you could, hey, help, little help here. And she just seems to be adoring him to the point where he's just, down he goes. He's definitely one of the craziest Christ childs I've ever seen in painting, and believe me, I teach art history 1 with homunculuses in the medieval, and some ugly babies, right, let me tell you. And this is just a creepy, kind of baby Jesus. So you're just left like, what? This is making me feel all odd and bizarre. And then if you think about the composition, right, you have the columns in the background going to nowhere. You have the guy doing, we don't know what he's doing. And then you have this sense of, like, the composition falling away into the background sharply, but then really, really close and cramped to you on the left-hand side. So your eyes just kind of like zooming in the background and then clumped up in the front, zooming away up in front. It gives you almost vertigo to look at this painting with these cramped figures, and then this weird excessive space in the background. Again, you're just left sort of feeling like, well, I just don't feel right. Like, I feel a little seasick, right? So again, it's just a very, very odd example of how you would take a very traditional subject like the Madonna and Child and do it in a Mannerist way. This is Correggio, who's not talked about quite as much as Pontormo and Parmigianino, but still is a great example of mannerism. But what I love about his mannerism is there's always this kind of strange way he deals with the composition. He's usually shoving things really close to you or making things spiral up out of the distance. And he uses subjects to me that are a little bit odd. Like here you're dealing with the idea of Jupiter and Io. Jupiter, by the way, or Zeus, was known for turning himself into things so he could seduce people, like a mist of smoke. Here he is, this is the mist of smoke, a shower of coins, etc. And here he is abducting Ganymede. And I always joke that, Zeus/Jupiter was an equal opportunity lover of beauty. So notice, going after the ladies, going after the men, he didn't have a problem with either. Turning into this eagle, right, and swooping down and, taking this young farm boy up. But if you look at both compositions, they're all set very, very close to what we call the picture plane. Very, very close to the viewer. Like, smashed right up, to the front of that picture plane. Go look at a Renaissance painting again. There's a lot of recession into space, depth. Here you'll notice it's almost claustrophobic, where it's shoved up very, very close to where we're viewing it. And then there's kind of almost this sense of, like, corkscrewing, movement, in the piece, where I find Renaissance paintings are very still, very quiet. They don't have a lot of motion or energy encapsulated in them. So, and Baroque, the movement that comes next, is really about action and energy. So some people suggest Mannerism was a way of kind of pre-seeing that action energy, before Baroque really took over completely. Yeah, it's a good theory. The last painter I want to show you worked for the French king, Francois I. So I wanted you to be thinking about how Mannerism starts in Italy, but really does travel, throughout Europe, and becomes known as a movement all over. So similar to Leonardo going, to France and dying there. Same thing here, where we're thinking about how Mannerism spreads to France. And this is the Chateau de Chambord, one of the palaces of the king, located near Blois in France. And the artist I want to show you is the artist Bronzino, who was asked to create a painting for the chateau that dealt with the allegorical representations of time, love, and folly. And the French king said he wanted a beautiful piece that would be dazzling, would be shocking, would be something that would be unlike anything seen before. So Bronzino was like, okay, let me see what I can whip up for you. Now, if you don't know what an allegory is a personification, or making into a person, an abstract concept. So you're personifying an abstract concept. Time is an abstract concept. Love is an abstract concept. Folly is an abstract concept. The idea of you tell someone, I'm in love, and they're like, well, how do you know? I can't tell you're in love. And you're like, but I know, right? So this idea of the things that you can't see, justice, truth, anger, love, these are all abstract concepts that often are what we say are allegorized in artwork to make them plain to you or make you understand them. Liberty, right? But these are the sort of things you see allegorized in paintings. For instance, I'll show you the famous Liberty Leading the People as an allegory, etc., etc. But of course, this is a Mannerist work, so there's a high level of disturbing imagery, poses, etc. In the center, we have Venus, and we have Cupid. So obviously, Venus is love. She's Aphrodite / Venus, right? She's the goddess of love. But she's positioned in this way with Cupid, her son, which should make you uncomfortable in the Mannerist way, His hand embraces her breast in this mannered fashion where the nipple pokes out, very stylized, right? Again, it's very purposeful. And both of their bodies are hunched and scrunched and, posed in this manner that, again, would not be comfortable to a real person. And I would say that I think this painting is a lot about how love is about appearances, how love is about acting to a certain extent, but what goes on behind the curtain, let's say. And you'll notice that Father Time is trying to tear the curtain down in the background. And you'll notice that love is disarming Cupid. Venus is like, let me take your arrow from you. Well, he thinks he has her under control. He's trying to kiss her and she's behind his back, disarming him. So the idea of the games that people play, right, the moves that we make behind each other's backs, perhaps. So many people read this painting as how you can betray and what that betrayal leads to. And that how a lot of us enter into love with folly. Folly is like the childlike gleefulness, where you don't really think about something too hard. So guess who he is in this painting? He's the little boy running in. He's about to pelt them with the flowers. He's happy, he's go-lucky, he doesn't want to know that the sort of disgusting disease stuff that they're doing right now or thinking about right now. He's like, love is fun, and they're like, no, it's not. And then behind him you have this beautiful girl who seems to be offering you a gift, but if you look at her hindquarters, she's like this monster. And then to the left of Cupid is this creature like screaming, like, vengeance, wrath, betrayal. And at the bottom of Folly's feet, you see a mask. And then under Cupid's foot, you see a dove about to be smashed. This idea of peace, so easily thrown away, right? Masks that so easily slip. So I say often about this painting to me that this painting is gorgeous on the surface. You're just like mesmerized by it. It's actually one of my top 10 favorite paintings. Like if I had to steal a painting, I'd go after the Bronzino for sure. It's gorgeous. It's this gorgeous jewel box of a painting. It's just luscious. But it's a sick painting. It's like, you can't trust anyone, they're wearing a mask. They will betray you. Time will falter. Time will fail. Wrath will come for you. Don't believe the beautiful gifts that people hold out for you. you're left kind of thinking, ooh, okay, life is not what I thought it is, and love is not what I think it is. So again, on the surface, it looks like this beautiful work. But you scratch that surface and you're like, not really sure what I'm seeing there. And Bronzino, again, he worked for a lot of the wealthy clientele in Italy and France, doing portraits and such. And here is a very mannered portrait of a young man. Notice the mannered gesture of the hand in the book, and then the hand on the hip. So again, these are very purposeful mannered gestures that are placed into the portraits that, again, I don't think we really do as people naturally. Again, mannerism would fit in well with our selfie culture today, I think. Like, let me just rearrange myself to make myself look a little. Or I love when I see girls taking pictures now. There's always this way they pose with the hand flat on the hip. Like, very specific. Because it's been known that that mannered gesture makes you look a certain way, makes you look good, right? So there's not a lot of spontaneity. There's a lot of planning in how we present ourselves, and I think mannerism encapsulates that. Mannerism wasn't seen as much in sculpture and architecture, but I did want to show you a couple of examples there. This is the sculptor Giambologna and his famous Rape of the Sabine Women. And the marks on the back are from acid rain, from it being out in the environment. It's not part of the natural marble, so just so you know, that's a chemical reaction on the marble from acid rain. But I love this piece because there's a sense of twisting, turning, movement. And again, a lot of people say Mannerism predates, Baroque and the energy of Baroque. It was kind of leading you towards that movement. I love the complexness of this. It's a complicated sculptural piece. Again, go back and look at Michelangelo's David. It's this static, still sculpture looking at you. It's not moving. It's not trying to move. And Mannerists are like, how can we make this complicated? The Rape of the Sabine Women, by the way, is based off a Roman story where the Romans go into the Sabine village to take wives. Rape in this context means abduction, to take something. It doesn't mean rape as we understand our context for it today. But they abducted these women, so that is the story that you're seeing taking place in this corkscrewing, kind of piece, where the Sabine man is at the bottom, the Roman man is holding the woman up, the Sabine woman up, and abducting her, essentially. And finally, excuse me, I wanted to show you the Piazza di Te, created by Giulio Romano. And this is a piece of architecture done in the Mannerist fashion. Again, architecture really wasn't very suited to Mannerism, because if you think about building something, it should be logical, or it's going to cave in on you, right? It needs to follow rules. So Mannerism and architecture didn't really complement each other all that well, but this is a great example of Mannerist architecture. It was commissioned for the Duke of Mantua, a man named Gonzaga, and tried to create this sense of strangeness in architecture. Now, how can you see it on the exterior of the structure? You can see it through the list of elements I gave you on the left-hand side. And I know that maybe, you don't have a lot of vocabulary with architecture. That's okay. I'll kind of walk you through them. The pediments, for instance, are the triangular areas over the doors and the windows. You'll notice that they are broken by these sort of pieces thrusting up into them. Normally, that would not be considered architecturally very sound. The entablature is the strip running across the top right under the roofing. And you'll notice that it's indented, or it has these things kind of denting into it and coming out of it. You have the slipping keystones. The keystones are the elements at the top of arches, and they kind of almost seem like they're coming out. And then finally you have windows that are what we call blind. They don't go anywhere, they don't do anything. Even if you don't know a lot about architecture, you should know that what's going on here is that the rules are being subverted. The normal rules are being broken. And that was the intention of the facade, or the outside of this structure. A facade basically means the outside, what you're looking at. So when someone says to you, oh, that's a fake facade, that means your exterior is not real, right? So again, they're kind of playing with the facade and creating these odd sort of images. Now you go inside the Piazza di Te and you run into all these strange paintings. The one on the left, for instance, is an image of the Duke of Mantua, basically shown as a cyclops, like this giant who has a very big club, if you get my drift. And you go throughout the palace and you run into all these crazy murals everywhere. This is my favorite, the Hall of Giants. Now I gave you some videos on the palazzo. I think it's best to watch a video of architecture rather than see still images, so I definitely lead you to go watch the video about the Palazzo di Te. You can see these spaces, you know, as they're meant to be seen, which is vivid and kind of moving through the spaces. But notice that these paintings don't make you feel safe and secure or rational. You know, again, you feel like the ceiling is falling in on you, right, while all these gods watch from above. It's about chaos. It's about the rules being broken, and that really was the goal of a Mannerist artist.